The 39 Steps. The 39 Steps is an adventure novel by Scottish author John Buchan. It was serialized in All Story Weekly and Blackwoods magazine around 1915 before being published in book form in October 1915 by William Blackwood and Sons, Edinburgh. It is the first of the 5 novels featuring Richard Hannay, an all-action hero with a stiff upper lip and a miraculous knack for getting himself out of a tricky situation. The novel has been adapted many times, including several films and a long-running stage play. In 2003, the book was listed on the BBC's The Big Read poll of the UK's best loved novels. Background. John Buchan wrote the 39 Steps while he was ill in bed with a duodenal ulcer, an illness which remained with him all his life. Buchan's son William later wrote that the name of the book originated when the author's daughter was counting the stairs at St. Kubi, a private nursing home on Cliff Promenade in Broadstairs, where Buchan was coalescing. Quote, "There was a wooden staircase leading down to the beach. My sister, who was about 6, and who had just learned to count properly, went down them and gleefully announced, 'There are 39 steps.'" End quote. There were actually 78, but he halved the number to make a better title. When the original steps were later replaced, one of them, complete with a brass plaque, was sent to Buchan. They were replaced by concrete, and this site, now numbering 108, still runs from the garden to the beach. The novel was his first shocker, as he called it, a story combining personal and political dramas. It marked a turning point in Buchan's literary career and introduced his adventuring hero, Richard Hannay. He described a shocker as an adventure where the events in the story are unlikely and the reader is only just able to believe that they really happened. Plot summary. In late May 1914, when World War I is imminent in Europe, Richard Hannay returns home to London after having lived and worked in Rhodesia as a mining engineer. One night, his neighbor, an American who claims to be in fear for his life, asks if Hannay can let him in. The man appears to know of an anarchist plot to destabilize Europe, beginning with a plan to assassinate the Greek premier, Konstantin Karlitz, during his forthcoming visit to London on the forthcoming 15 June. The man, named Franklin P. Scudder, is a freelance spy and reveals that he has faked his own death with a corpse in his flat. Scudder claims to be following a ring of German spies called the Black Stone, who are trying to steal Britain's naval defense plans for the outbreak of war and are also after him. Hannay, convinced of his honesty, lets Scudder hide in his flat. Police discovered a fake suicide, but suspected nothing. Nevertheless, Hannay finds Scudder murdered in his flat a few days later. Feeling now bestowed with the responsibility to foil the plot, as well as mortal danger himself, Hannay takes up Scudder's encoded little notebook and escapes his apartment under watch by the plotters by disguising himself as the milkman the next early morning. Arriving just in time at St. Pancras station, Henry takes a train to Galloway, southwest Scotland, believing it is sufficiently remote to hide in until just before the fateful date in June. Henry lodges in a shepherd's cottage overnight and reads in a newspaper that the police are looking for him in Scotland, suspecting him of a Scotter's murder. Henry boards a local train heading east, but jumps off between stations to confuse his trail. He eventually finds an inn where he stays the night. He tells the innkeeper a modified version of his story and persuades the man to shelter him. While staying at the inn, Henry cracks the cipher used in Scotter's code book. The next day, two men arrive at the inn looking for Henry, but the innkeeper sends them away. When they return later, Henry recognizes them as his vultures in London, stealthily leaves the inn, steals their car, and drives off. But soon, Henry sees that he is being pursued by an aeroplane. Later, a policeman in a remote village tries to stop him as he drives through, making him realize that a search warrant for him has been issued. He decides to stay off the main roads. Driving very fast, he nearly gets into a crash with another motor car. Swerving to avoid it, his car falls off a cliff, Henry narrowly escaping death. The other driver, Harry Bullivant, a local landowner and prospective politician, feels dreadfully responsible for this and offers to take him home to clean up. When he learns that Henry possesses deep knowledge of Australia, he excitedly invites him to address an election meeting that afternoon where he is due to speak about the colonies, but is ridden with stage fright. Henry manages well, better than Harry. Both return to Harry's place, and Henry feels able to entrust him with his story. To thank him for his speech and help him with the plot, Harry writes an introductory letter about Henry to his godfather, who holds a senior position at the Foreign Office. Henry leaves Harry by foot and tries to hide in the countryside, but is spotted again by the aeroplane. He then notices a group of men on the ground searching for him. Miraculously, he meets a road mender out on the moor who is suffering from a severe hangover and is afraid that the new road surveyor due this very day sees him in such a state. Henry offers to swap places with him, sending the grateful workman home for the day. His disguise eventually fools a party of pursuers by car, whom Henry recognizes as those looking for him at the inn. As dawn nears, acquaintances from London, Marmaduke Jopley, whom Henry hates, drives by. Henry calls him by his name, forces him to lend him his driver's outfit, and takes the wheel for several miles until they have passed the road logs that had been set up. He then lets his hostage free, who drives off. Now, back on foot, after an uncomfortable night on the hills, Henry wakes up in shock when he sees that the search post is closing in on him again, and he runs off. He finds a cottage and enters, desperate for cover, and the occupant calmly welcomes him. Unfortunately, the man turns out to be Hanny's very enemy. The spy rings chief. After a brief interrogation where Hanny plays fool, he locks him into a storage room. Not sure who the scurvy man in front of him really is, preferring to wait for his accomplices to return, who had seen Hanny the day before. The room in which Hanny is locked appears to contain bomb-making materials, which he uses to break out of the cottage. Badly shaken by the explosion and intoxicated by the fumes, he crawls to the top of a building nearby, where he waits until dawn, where everyone has gone to look for him, then runs off at night, narrowly escaping a few traps around the property. Hanny returns to the helpful road mender's place to retrieve his possessions, but is so badly hurt after his escape that he has to stay in bed for a few days to recover from his escape. He then joins a shepherd to walk to the nearest station, where he catches a train to go and meet Harry's Foreign Office relative, Sir Walter Bullivant, who is taking a few days' vacation at his summer retreat in the Kent countryside. After exchanging coded signals, Hanny is invited to join Sir Walter at the house, is given a new attire, bathes luxuriously, and is served a beautiful dinner. Sir Walter, who had received Harry's letter, then summons Hanny to spill off his story. They discuss Scudder's notes. Sir Walter believes in it, except the Greek premier's murder plot. He suddenly receives a phone call from London telling him that Carolus has indeed just been assassinated. Sir Walter and Hanny returns to London the next morning, where they clear his name for Scotland Yard, who releases him. Free of involvement in Scudder's murder, Sir Walter lets Harry off for the evening as he has arranged an emergency top-secret meeting at his London home to discuss the situation and Britain's naval defense plan with government members and a French army representative. However, Hanny feels agitated and unfulfilled. After an unpleasant dinner, he goes for a walk and runs into a party with Marmaduke Jopley, who tries to arrest him as Scudder's murderer. Hanny gets into a fight, flees followed by the police and everyone. Sprinting fast, he managed to reach Sir Walter's home, where he finds shelter in his hallway, where the butler closes the door on his pursuers. While Hanny waits for the meeting to end, the First Sea Lord leaves. Yet they briefly make eye contact, and Hanny is certain that the man is one of his pursuers in disguise. He breaks into the meeting room, rudely interrupting the proceedings, forcing Sir Walter into telephoning the First Sea Lord's home, where a servant informs them his lordship is asleep in bed and never went to Sir Walter's meeting. Desperate to stop the impostor from escaping with the secret information that was discussed, Hanny and the officials comb Scudder's notebook. They reason that the phrase "the 39 steps," along with the date and the title information, high tide at 10:11 p.m., must indicate the location of the escape point for the conspirators. They all go to the Admiralty for help, and in the dead of night manage to summon the help of a coast guardsman who knows this part of the coast well and identifies a particular quiet, middle-class location on the southeast coast of England that matches Scotter's description. Henny immediately sets off by car with a police officer to his place, while Sir Walter makes arrangements with a Scotland Yard. They find an area near the shore with several sets of steps, one of them having 39, and an anchored yacht nearby. They approach the boat, posing as a fisherman, and discover that the officer on board looks and seems very German. Henny then watches 3 men playing tennis in a villa with the 39 steps staircase. They match the description of his pursuers, but their extraordinarily normal behavior causes him to doubt their involvement. Despite his anguish and fear of being utterly mistaken, he confronts the men. They are totally surprised and invite him to join their game of cards. Henny grows increasingly uncomfortable, yet by chance spots a subtle gesture that he had seen his host make when he was interrogating him at his cottage on the moor. This reassures him that they are his pursuers. Furthermore, one of his hosts suddenly explains that he has to leave. Masks are down. Henny blows a whistle, and his man enters to arrest them. But the man in a hurry escapes. Bound for the yacht at sea, Henny reveals they had already taken the boat, and all 3 men are arrested. The United Kingdom enters World War I 3 weeks later, its secret naval defense plans intact, and Henny is commissioned as a captain in the army. Literary significance and criticism. The 39 Steps is one of the earliest examples of the man-on-the-run thriller archetype, subsequently adopted by filmmakers as a much-used plot device. In the 39 Steps, Buchan holds up Richard Henny as an example to his readers of an ordinary man who puts his country's interest before his own safety. The story was a great success with the men in the First World War trenches. One soldier wrote to Buchan, "The story is greatly appreciated in the midst of mud and rain and shells, and all that could make a trench life depressing." Henny continued his adventures in 4 subsequent books. 2 were set during the war, when he continued his undercover work against the Germans and their allies, the Turks, in Green Mantle and Mr. Steadfast. The other 2 stories, The 3 Hostages and The Island of Sheep, were set in the post-war period, when Henny's opponents were criminal gangs. The novel has been adapted to films several times and has been a popular film and enjoyed by people around the world.